Good morning, everyone. We are awaiting Dragon Freedom's departure from the International Space Station on its way back to planet Earth. We expect Freedom to push away from the space station at 8:05 a.m. Pacific Time or 11:05 a.m. Eastern Time with the crew of AX2, Peggy Whitson, John Schaffner, Ali Al-Karni, and Rayana Barnawi, who spent the last 8 days living and working on board the space station. In preparation for departure, a short while ago, the AX2 crew suited up and the Dragon and station hatches were sealed. My name is Jessie Anderson. I'm a production manager here at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. And joining me today is Duke Brady, a multimedia specialist with Axiom Space.
Thanks, Jessie. It's great to be here with you. And you might say for the AX2 crew, it's all downhill from here.
It is. And guiding us through the action today as Dragon departs station is NASA's Public Affairs Officer, Sandra Jones, at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. How's it going, Sandra?
Hey, Jesse. Hey, Duke. Thanks so much. Great to be here with you both today. Everything going well here in Mission Control, Houston. The team just recently wrapped up the hatch closure procedures, and we're looking forward to a smooth on-time undocking later this morning.
This is live coverage of the beginning of the return to Earth for AX2, the second Axiom space mission to the International Space Station. This webcast will follow the crew's departure from the ISS and conclude once they have exited the approach ellipsoid, which is the imaginary outer boundary of the ISS. Then tonight, Axiom and SpaceX will pick back up with live coverage starting about an hour before splashdown to share the conclusion of this mission. For those of you following along, AX2 crew consists of Commander Peggy Whitson, pilot John Schaffner, and Saudi national astronauts Ali Al-Karni and Rayana Barnawi. The four of them lifted off from Launch Pad 39A on Sunday, May 21st, and arrived at station about 15.5 hours later, which marked Dragon's fastest launch to docking time for a human spaceflight mission. Over the last week, it has been such a joy and privilege to see our colleagues, our friends really, fulfilling their dreams and making such an impact from space. They absolutely crushed their goals during this mission, from groundbreaking scientific research to some truly engaging and heartwarming outreach events. They have made the most of their time in orbit, that's for sure. Speaking for the Axiom space teams, we could not be more proud of this crew and everything they've accomplished. There's certainly a lot of hugs and handshakes waiting for them when they get home, and some well-deserved rest eventually. But before that begins, we get to share their journey back to Earth with all of you right now.
For return, we look at a number of weather items. Some of the obvious ones are no rain or no chance of lightning in the recovery zone, both for the safety of the crew inside the capsule and the recovery teams on the water. We also are looking for wind speeds less than 10 miles per hour and relatively calm seas so that we can safely perform recovery operations, which includes landing a helicopter on the recovery ship to fly our crew back to shore. Once Dragon departs station, the crew's flight home is expected to last approximately 12 hours. Dragon will also execute a phasing burn to lower its orbit and line the spacecraft up with its landing locations. These 4 departure burns will gradually increase the distance between the spacecraft and the space station. Dragon will also execute a phasing burn to lower its orbit and line the spacecraft up with its landing location. Then the action starts to pick up pace with trunk separation, closure of the nose cone, a deorbit burn, re-entry, deployment of the drogue and main parachutes, and finally splashdown off the coast of Florida, at which point our teams will recover the AX2 crew. Dragon is targeted to splash down off the coast of Florida this evening at 8:09 p.m. Pacific Time or 11:09 p.m. Eastern Time, followed by the crew getting picked up at sea by one of our SpaceX recovery vessels. For those of you interested in keeping tabs on the mission, be sure to check out the Follow Dragon tracker on SpaceX.com.
And as a reminder, just like its approach to the International Space Station, Dragon's departure and deorbit is designed to be fully autonomous, requiring no action from the crew on board. Let's go now to Sandra Jones at NASA's Johnson Space Center to hear about how the crew has been preparing for their return and what we can expect from here until Dragon departs from station. Sandra?
Thanks, Duke, and welcome to Mission Control Houston at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. We're currently inside the International Space Station Flight Control Room, where the team of flight Controllers are being led by NASA Flight Director Marcos Flores. Earlier this morning, we brought you live coverage of hatch closure, in which the Axiom 2 crew suited up, re-entered the SpaceX Freedom vehicle, and closed the hatch between the International Space Station and Freedom. We're now awaiting that undocking, and we'll be looking ahead to the go-no-go poll for undocking here in just a couple of minutes. While it's been a very busy morning here in Mission Control Houston in anticipation of undocking, the Axiom 2 crew has also been busy on board station in anticipation of their return home. Over the last several days, the astronauts worked to pack Dragon full of cargo for their return journey. Along with the crew, Dragon will return more than 300 pounds of cargo back to Earth. That cargo includes scientific experiments, some hardware,
Dragon,
and
SpaceX
other items.
on the Big Loop.
All of
Final
this cargo will get
reconfigurations for
offloaded
undock
after we get the
complete
crew
and
out
nominal.
following splashdown,
Houston and
and
Hawthorne
the
have both
scientific
go for
samples will be
undock
sent to
sequence start at
researchers for
1500
final analysis.
and separation at
The crew
1505.
also took some time to
When
get their
ready,
SpaceX
confirm visors
spacesuits
down
unpacked
crew
and
are
ready for the
for
journey
undock
home,
and departure.
with Ali Al-Karni and Rihanna Barnaby suiting up inside station prior to making their way into Dragon. Now, since getting the hatches closed, Peggy Whitson and John Schaffner also
We copy.
remain suited up, and all 4 astronauts are in their seats and are standing by for undocking. Again, we've got that final go-no-go poll coming up in just a couple of minutes, where the joint SpaceX and NASA teams will make their final call for Dragon to depart space station. This is one of many checkpoints in the return that will continue all the way up until just before the deorbit burn. This gives mission managers multiple chances to assess the weather at the splashdown zones and just make sure everything is lining up before Dragon departs. So we'll stand by for that final go-no-go, but for now, everything continuing to look good for an on-time departure. And we did hear confirmation that Dragon Freedom is go to undock from the International Space Station. Again, we are targeting 10:05 a.m. Central Time this morning for that undocking. The joint teams did pull go for that undock, and everything proceeding smoothly. Currently, Dragon is in its final configuration before undocking. Now, just like its approach to the International Space Station for docking, Dragon's departure and undocking and deorbit is designed to be fully autonomous, requiring no action from the crew. Once Dragon departs the International Space Station, the flight home is expected to last a little more than 12 hours. Dragon will use its Draco thrusters to thrust away from the station in a series of carefully choreographed maneuvers of 4 departure burns, which increase the distance between the spacecraft and the space station. Dragon will also execute a phasing burn to lower its orbit and line the spacecraft up with the landing zone. Today's splashdown zone is off the coast of Florida. We're targeting Panama City. The weather looking great in Panama City. Now, following the phasing burn to lower Dragon's orbit, the action will really start to pick up with trunk separation, closure of the nose cone, deorbit burn, the reentry burn, and then deployment of the drogue and main parachutes. Finally, splashdown will occur off the coast of Florida. Following splashdown, the Axiom 2 crew will be recovered from Freedom and placed on board the recovery vessel before flying on a helicopter back to land. So again, we did hear that confirmation that Dragon is a go to undock. So now we are waiting for the undocking sequence to actually begin. Once that happens, it will take less than 5 minutes for Dragon to separate from the International Space Station. The first step in the automatic undocking sequence is for the umbilicals to retract. These umbilicals connect Dragon's systems to the space station, transferring power, telemetry, and commands between the two vehicles throughout Dragon's stay. Once umbilical separation is complete, Dragon will unlatch itself from the space station by releasing the 12 hard capture hooks in 2 separate phases. All of that combined takes less than 5 minutes, and then Dragon will be ready to depart from space station and push itself away further by using its thrusters. Now, Dragon's initial departure from space station is a little different than other docked vehicles like the Soyuz that rely on springs to push them away from the docking port. Dragon will actually execute 2 short thruster firings to undock using a combination of the 12 Draco engines around the base of the capsule. The first 2 helps to break any stiction between Dragon and the docking port, and the second slowly backs the spacecraft away. So we are expecting the call for the undocking sequence to begin in just a few minutes from now. All right, and we are just a couple of minutes away from the undocking command to be sent. Again, it will be about a 5-minute process between the time the undocking command is sent and the time Dragon actually undocks from the International Space Station. Once that undocking command is sent, the first thing we'll be looking for a call out for is that umbilicals will retract. Then we'll be looking ahead to the hooks to open in 2 sets of sticks, and then 2 short undocking burns will occur, marking the official undocking of Crew Dragon Freedom from the International Space Station. Now 10 seconds away from that command being sent.
Dragon, SpaceX on the Big Loop undock sequence commanded.
And you just heard confirmation of the initiation of the undocking sequence that has begun, and the umbilicals are retracting. Hearing good calls on the movement of those umbilicals so far.
Umbilical demate complete and nominal.
Umbilical demate was successful and as expected. So the umbilical has been retracted and the first set of hooks, that first set of 6, are beginning to retract. Again, the umbilical has fully retracted and the first set of 6 hooks of 12 are also retracting. Each of these sets of hooks takes a little bit more than 2 minutes to fully retract. And on your screen you can see the team here in Mission Control Houston. We're currently still in what we call integrated operations while we're working alongside SpaceX and Axiom, but following the undocking and exit from the approach ellipsoid this morning, we'll turn it over to Axiom and SpaceX to take it the rest of the way home as Crew Dragon Freedom prepares to splash down off the coast of Panama City, Florida this evening at 10:04 p.m. Central Time. That first set of 6 hooks continuing to retract.
Dragon, SpaceX on the big loop, first set of hooks open and nominal.
Galaxies.
And you did hear the confirmation there that the first set of hooks have successfully retracted, everything continuing to go as planned. The second set of hooks are now in the process of retracting. This second set of hooks will take about 2 minutes as well to retract. And we're about halfway through that second set of hooks. Second set of hooks continuing to retract.
Dragon, SpaceX on the big loop, all hooks open. Dragon separation confirmed.
And we do have confirmation of Freedom, Crew Dragon Freedom undocking at 10:05 a.m. Central over the Tasman Sea. And you're seeing a video of that separation on your screen right now. So Dragon has started to push itself away from the International Space Station, and with that, Peggy Whitson, John Schaffner, Ali Alcarni, and Rihanna Barnawi have completed their journey aboard the International Space Station. Again, confirmed separation at 10:05 a.m. Central Time.
Dragon, SpaceX on the big loop, depart burn 0 nominal.
Very happy, and thank you for the hospitality. ISS.
And we are hearing good confirmation of those undocking burns. You also heard some work.
And Axiom 2, it was a pleasure having you on board. We really appreciate all the hard work. Congratulations on an outstanding mission. Thank you for all your great generosity. It was greatly appreciated. And I wish you calm seas and calm winds for your splashdown this evening. Take care. Fly safe.
Thanks, Station. We appreciate it all.
And Houston copies.
And some kind words there between Axiom 2 Commander Peggy Whitson and Steve Bowen, who's on board the International Space Station monitoring today's undocking. Now, lit up against the International Space Station there, you just saw the flashes from the thrusters as those departure burns continue to take place. These short burns help increase the speed at which Dragon is flying away from the space station and start to send it on a trajectory up and over the International Space Station. And there you can see those thruster firings lighting up the Soyuz vehicle docked to the International Space Station. The next burn that we're tracking is the departure burn, which will help increase the initial opening rate between the Crew Dragon and the space station. This burn will last about 21 seconds. And this departure burn 1 is slated to begin just about 2 minutes from now. Following this burn, the crew will start to take off their spacesuits until it's time to deorbit. They do wear their launch and re-entry spacesuits during the dynamic phases of flight. However, during this 12-hour journey to splashdown, they'll have the opportunity to take their spacesuits off and get comfortable. And then they'll put their spacesuits back on ahead of splashdown later this evening. Now 1 minute until the departure burn 1 begins. Again, this 21-second burn is going to help continue to propel Freedom away from the International Space Station. And shortly after the departure burn occurs, Freedom will exit the Keep Out sphere. The Keep Out sphere is an imaginary sphere which is 200 meters in radius around the International Space Station. And it's one of several safety zones that's set up to govern visiting spacecraft either arriving or departing the space station. Before moving into the Keep Out sphere, spacecraft have to be configured where they would not cross the imaginary boundary for at least 4 orbits, even if the spacecraft were to lose all of its maneuvering. Depart burn 1 underway. And you are seeing some of those thruster firings on board Dragon. Again, this burn is using the Draco thrusters,
Dragon
and that burn
SpaceX
did
on
just
the big
complete
loop.
and all went
Departure burn
smoothly.
1 nominal, and all Dragon systems look healthy. Good undock. At this time, you are go to DOF suits in 4.012, and finally a reminder that the big loop will be deactivated following Dragon's exit from the approach ellipsoid.
Dragon copies. Go for suit DOF.
And with that call out of a successful departure burn 1, the crew now has the go to get out of their spacesuits and get comfortable for the 12-hour journey until splashdown. Continuing to get some views. Continuing to get some views of Freedom as it backs away from the International Space Station. And we just got word that Dragon has exited the keep out sphere. Again, that's imaginary sphere. It's that imaginary sphere 200 meters in radius around the International Space Station. And on your screen here, as you continue to see Freedom back away, you're actually able to see those windows on the vehicle and can kind of make out the crew inside as they continue to get smaller and smaller, making their way back home.
Dragon copies. The next major milestone that we are tracking this morning is when Dragon exits the approach ellipsoid, or AE. This is another imaginary shape. It's a three-dimensional ellipsoid measuring 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers. It's in the same family as the keep out sphere. One of the key differences with the approach ellipsoid is that vehicles outside it have to be on what we call a 24-hour safe free drift trajectory. And we're getting some really great views of Dragon here as it continues to undock from the International Space Station. You can see the nose cone is open and the trunk is attached. Before splashdown, the nose cone will close and that trunk will be deorbited. And with everything continuing to go smoothly here in Mission Control Houston, we are waiting for Dragon to exit that approach ellipsoid following the on-time undocking this morning at 10:05 a.m. Central Time. Dragon has completed a series of burns to back it away from the International Space Station, and again, everything going A-OK this morning here in Mission Control Houston. So I'm going to toss it over to Hawthorne to give us an update, and so they can share a little bit about what it was like to see undocking from their perspective.
Awesome. Thank you, Sandra. If you're just now joining us, you are watching the undocking of the Dragon Freedom vehicle carrying the AX-2 crew members as they make their way back down home to Earth. And just as Dragon fully autonomously flew to the International Space Station, it is fully autonomously flying them back down to Earth as well. So all these maneuvers that you're seeing are fully autonomous, and we have completed a few burns. Once the vehicle is out of the keep-out sphere, then it can perform its deorbit burn and make its way back down to Earth. So what you can expect as Dragon returns is the trunk will be jettisoned. Once we jettison the trunk, then the vehicle can reorient itself for making its way back into the Earth's atmosphere, and then the drogue and main parachutes will deploy, and the crew will safely touch down in the ocean off the coast of Florida. Now, just as a reminder, this is the second flight for this Dragon, specifically Dragon Freedom, and it first flew on Crew 4 in April in 2022. This is also the 10th human spaceflight mission in the last 3 years.
Wow, exciting stuff. Well, and for Axiom Space, these missions serve as a precursor in developing the teams, systems, and relationships necessary to operate our own Axiom station currently under construction. For Peggy Whitson, John Schaffner, and Saudi national astronauts Ali Al-Karni and Rayana Barnawi, this has been an incredibly successful mission. As the second private mission to the International Space Station, Axiom 2 is also an important step for Axiom Space and its academic and industrial partners to perform proof-of-concept studies and cutting-edge advancements in microgravity. During their time on the orbiting laboratory, the AX-2 astronauts successfully executed over 20 STEAM outreach engagements and 20 different microgravity experiments, as well as 8 media events. They utilized novel technologies on orbit that could be used for future human spaceflight pursuits and benefit humankind on Earth. Returning with them in the SpaceX Dragon Freedom is more than 300 pounds of cargo and important data that will impact our understanding of human physiology on Earth and on orbit. And beyond all that, they also had a few moments to take in a view unlike any found on Earth, looking at the planet from 250 miles above it. So for more details on the incredible work performed by this crew and on orbit, check out the axiomspace.com/AX2 research website. It's going to be pretty incredible to see all of the work that they perform on station brought back and those data analyzed and everything really given sort of its full breadth of knowledge once they get back here on Earth.
Yeah, Duke, this has been an incredible mission so far, and we're going to send it back over to Houston, Texas Mission Control with Sandra Jones. How's it going, Sandra?
Thanks, Jesse and Duke. Everything's still continuing to go smoothly here in Mission Control Houston. We are standing by for Dragon Freedom to exit that approach ellipsoid. Again, this is a 4 kilometer by 2 kilometer by 2 kilometer zone around the International Space Station, in which a vehicle must be on a 24-hour safe trajectory from interfering with space station, even if it lost all maneuvering capability. We are just a few minutes away from that expected approach ellipsoid exit. Now, once that approach ellipsoid exit does occur, the team here in Mission Control will continue to monitor every step of the way, but the prime responsibility once they exit approach ellipsoid will be on SpaceX and Axiom Space. So again, just a few minutes away from approach ellipsoid exit, we are targeting that exit for 10:25 a.m. Central. Another thing that will happen once the crew exits the approach ellipsoid is that integrated communications loop called the big loop will be taken down, as we are no longer in those integrated communications. And at this time, Crew Dragon Freedom is 916 meters away from the International Space Station. Just about a minute until expected exit from the approach ellipsoid.
Dragon, SpaceX, ComCheck on Dragon to ground.
SpaceX Dragon, ComCheck. How do you read us on Dragon to ground?
Hey Peggy, we've got you 5x5 on Dragon to ground over, I'm assuming, the cabin mic. At this time, we've just exited the approach ellipsoid, and Dragon is on a safe free drift trajectory, and I'm letting you know that we're going to take down the big loop here shortly.
Okay, copy. Thank you.
And we did get that confirmation that Dragon has successfully exited the approach ellipsoid and is continuing their journey back to Earth. So with that, from here in Mission Control Houston, we will conclude our coverage of this mission and hand it over to the teams at SpaceX and Axiom to take it from here. Thank you so much for joining us for our coverage today of hatch closure and undocking. Until next time, this is Mission Control Houston.
Awesome. Thank you, Sandra. Now that Peggy Whitson, John Schaffner, Ali Alkarni, and Rihanna Barnawi have departed the International Space Station, it will only take them roughly 12 hours until they make their way back down to Earth. Next up, the crew will doff their spacesuits to get a little bit more comfy for flight. After a brief off-duty period, the crew will then begin final cabin in-cabin preparations. And approximately 6.5 hours from now, they will don or put back on their spacesuits and begin final preparations for deorbit, entry, and splashdown. Our teams here on the ground will continue to keep an eye on the weather to ensure a safe return to Earth for Dragon and the AX-2 crew.
And should the current projections hold, starting at 11:04 p.m. Eastern and 8:04 p.m. Pacific this evening, Axiom and SpaceX will pick back up with live coverage of the conclusion of this AX-2 mission. Should teams need to adjust the timing of splashdown, it is our plan to go live about an hour before splashdown. For the latest on the timing of this final stage of the AX-2 journey, be sure to visit axiomspace.com, and you can track Dragon Freedom's flight on spacex.com/launches. From all of us at Axiom Space, thank you to NASA for the incredible efforts made on this mission toward the shared goal of expanding access to low Earth orbit to include more countries, institutions, industries, and individuals than ever before. This is how we are building history. And thank you, Jesse, for sharing the desk with me. It's been an honor. And thank you for tuning in, all of you. Spasiba, shukran. We look forward to sharing the culmination of this mission with you soon.